for you as it is for me. I've been able to get through some technical hurdles today, which is always a good feeling. And it's really suitable to be talking about this issue, which is compound articulations in Dorico. Now, there are a few ways to interpret this, and this is actually a question that Shubis, who is here with us today, had asked, but it's also something I've heard from other people, especially in one-on-one conversations about libraries that offer us multiple dimensions. And if you are used to using the synchron player in VSL, Vienna strings, then you may be familiar in the synchron player with this idea of dimensions, and it's a very powerful way to create more realistic orchestral playback with a library where you can sort of stack different characteristics or dimensions onto a playback sample so that you're getting something more nuanced that works in your line or your passage more effectively. So the way we're going to be doing this here, and I'm going to demonstrate, I'm just using the sine player. I think a lot of people who follow this channel are already using orchestral tools because I use the examples so often. But I think that generally this would apply to any library that's complex and professional enough to allow multiple variations. So what I'm going to be doing today is showing you essentially building an initial playing or playback technique, I guess we'll say, that is going to be legato and espressivo. And so it's going to have legato transitions, but it's going to have that sort of vibrato sound of an espressivo patch. And then I'm going to stack onto that different legato transitions. So in orchestral tools strings or the Berlin strings, you actually get a choice of different legato transitions. They have slurred, fingered, runs, ostinato, and then portamento. And these can be triggered based on how fast you play. They can also be triggered on how intensely the velocity, what the intensity of the velocity is. Here, though, you're going to see how I've actually used them to basically respond to a simple playing technique. But to start out, let's really define the difference between a playback technique and a playing technique, because this is central to understanding how you can stack different articulations one on top of the other. A playback technique is the thing that has to be in place, has to be already set up in order to be applied in an expression map. But that's all the playback technique does, is it talks between the expression map and your sound library, your sample library. Now, a playing technique allows you to put that in the score. So a playing technique is, how are you going to display this? Let's look at a very simple example with regards to legato. And let me switch into my desktop here. And you can see that if I were to take this passage right here, and I were to just use a slur to connect them in a legato line, and that would indicate to in this case, the violin player, that my intention is for them to connect those notes so that they sort of have a flowing, more lyrical expression, right? And you can see that down here in my key editor, that this is showing an internal effect of legato. Now, I have not set up legato. It wasn't something I had to set up because that's so common. It's built into Dorico and it's triggered by doing this. But what this means is that I don't necessarily really have to build a playing technique in order for my score to trigger a certain sample over another. I do have to have a playback technique. So if I'm going to be combining, as I will in the upcoming demo, legato, portamento, ostinato. I mean, what is ostinato? Well, in the case of orchestral tools, Berlin strings, and there are other Berlin libraries, ostinato is really all about a legato transition that's conducive to the slight separation or the handling of notes that are being played repetitively or sort of quickly, right? Which is what an ostinato usually functions to do. So it's a special legato transition, really. It's not actually a whole articulation. It's just a legato transition, as is portamento. Portamento is a sort of sliding between notes as, and in this case, it's actually being expressed as a legato transition. But playback techniques have to be in existence in order for you to put them in your expression map. You don't need to have them in order to have your score trigger those. But if you want to have something in your score that's visible that you create custom, then you're going to probably have to create something custom. And I did actually have to create a couple of custom things for this. If we go up here and I look at my playback techniques, the two that I had to create in order for this demo was ostinato, and let's see where I believe, yep, ostinato. That's because that's what Orchestral Tools calls this legato transition. It was not in there naturally because it wouldn't really make sense to have a technique called ostinato. But here I needed to set that up as a playback technique in order to be able to do this compound thing. The other thing is they had portamento up and down. I think, where is it? It's maybe in ornaments. Let's see. Where was portamento? Yeah. So they had portamento down and up, but that was too restrictive for me. So I had actually created one that was just called portamento, and I don't know exactly where I put that. I guess I put it here under techniques. So I had to create that manually, and they are both set to direction. Direction means that they'll take effect until they're either stopped or they're changed to something else. Okay? So I did need to create some playback techniques. Now, CC switching is how I'm going to be switching these. That's very consistent with my other tutorials where I'm using a MIDI port to access an instance called violin in Vienna Ensemble Pro. Within that, I have the violins on channel 1, and then, on port 1, and then inside the violin, I have my violin on channel 1, and then the individual articulations are triggered by CC70. Let's take a look at how that's set up just so that there's no questions. So I've got in VE Pro, I've got one instance called violins 1. It's on port 1 right here. This is just running the sine player. And then over here in the sine player, I have loaded up one instance of the violins running on channel 1, and I'm using CCs. And if you're using sine player and you're not sure how to do that, you can always just right click. For some reason, it's not letting me right click on here, but normally you would right click on here and you'd be able to choose that you wanted to use CCs. So CC70, a value of CC70 that is sent with 0, a value of 0, is going to trigger this one here, and this first espressivo long. What I did was I triplicated, if that's a word, espressivo long patch. I enabled legato on all 3 of them, and on one I set up the speed zone to be only fingered, but there are other options I could choose, like slurred, that sort of thing. The second instance, again, legato is on, but this is set to portamento right there. And the third one here is set to ostinato right there. Okay. And they are running on CC70 values 0, 1, and 2. So now I've got this passage. You're going to hear that it generally sounds extremely flat as is, just playing through a regular old patch. So let me go back here, select my default patch, and play it back, and you can hear how sort of flat and lifeless this sounds. Okay, so very flat, lifeless. That's natural because these transitions aren't realistic and the articulations aren't realistic. Now here what I've done is I have decided this first phrase here is going to be legato and espressivo. And I'm going to show you how I've set these up. But you can see down here that I've got legato and espressivo in the playing lane within the key editor. And it's showing the active techniques are legato and espressivo. Then over here for this collection right here, this ostinato here from D to G, I've got legato plus espressivo plus ostinato. The ostinato was something I had to create. This last note here is just legato and espressivo, right? So it's back to just being not having the ostinato legato transition. And then the final line here, which is very pretty sounding when you play it back, has this portamento transition between these. But I'd have to link these all with a slur if I want to recognize legato playback, because that's built in to Dorico. Legato is not a playback technique that you have to manually create. It exists by default, but you do have to put the legato slur if you want to trigger a compound articulation that includes legato, right? Let's look at the expression map here. So when legato plays, I've just created this expression map called compound PT demo. Let's take a look at what's in there. So legato plus espressivo. And so literally when I create a new bass switch, you'll notice these are all bass switches here. You could do this with add-ons, and in a certain situation, I think that might be better. But in this kind of situation where I really am wanting to combine essential switches, I chose to use bass switches. If there was something much more temporary or much more of a subtle change, like I wanted consordino, something like that, then I would probably use an add-on for that. But here, what I would do if I wanted to create one that was, you know, let's say consordino, I think maybe they don't have consordino in here built in, but let's say that they have sul tasto. I'm sure they've got that. Let's say that I wanted legato and sul tasto. Then go in here. Let's find it. There it is. I would select it, and now I'm on Mac, so I'm going to hold down Command. I think if you're on Windows, you'd hold down Control. And you'll see down here, right, at the bottom of the window, we have sul tasto selected. But if I were to go up, holding Command now, I were to go up and find legato, then click that as well while holding Command. Now I get sul tasto and legato, and I could hit OK. Now the way this is going to work is that this is not going to be triggered if my note is only under a legato slur, because it wouldn't be both legato and sul tasto. And it's not going to work if I only have sul tasto. I would have to be applying sul tasto to notes that are also legato. If I were to go ahead and zoom all the way out here, and let's just take a note. Oops. Add it right there. And I'm going to turn that into a half note. And what I'm doing here is just a little demonstration. If I were to put those under a slur, and then I also were to Shift P sul tasto, like that, so that there now it's legato and sul tasto, you'll see that now in my lane down here, I'm seeing legato and sul tasto. That's showing me, the fact that it's in the lane is showing me that Dorico has interpreted it correctly, that there's something in my expression map it has connected. But if I did not have it under a legato slur or sul tasto was missing, that's one of the complicated things about using these kinds of compound articulations, is that if one's missing, you might get tricked into thinking that it should be recognizing it, but it's not. So always use the playing lane down here, the playing techniques lane, to double check your work to make sure that it is actually finding it. If it's finding it and you're not hearing the right articulation, then the problem is in your expression map, not triggering something that your sample libraries looking to play back, you know, so maybe the CC value is wrong, or the channel's wrong, or your key switch is wrong, or you aren't connected to the right VE Pro instance, or you're not loaded, you connected to the right instrument, or maybe you don't have the expression map loaded on that instrument, something like that. If you are seeing this down here, that means that Dorico has recognized that what you've put in your score matches something in the expression map. So now I've got all of these under legato. In order to make it also espressivo, I had to add the espressivo, and then you can use Option. I'm holding down Option and Shift. I guess this would be Alt and Shift on Windows, and you can actually kind of extend and define, not only visually, but also for the benefits of Dorico to understand which notes you want included. then that's what this little bar kind of helps. This little line continuation helps us to see. So I added espressivo here and I extended it out over this legato passage. Then ostinato extended out over here. Espressivo again over there. Then portamento and espressivo. And then, of course, my little sul testo, which I will just delete for the sake of this example. Go ahead and delete that. And so what I'm going to hear now, well, actually, let's look at the other expression map details. So I showed you how I actually multi-selected playback technique combination, right? That's all I did up here too. I created a multi-playback techniques, legato, espressivo, and portamento, and then the other ones that are listed right here as well. And then legato and espressivo is going to send a CC value of 0. The ostinato is going to send a CC value of 2. And the portamento is going to send me 1. So I come over here to where the espressivo is on channel 1 and CC1, CC70 value 1 rather. And I make sure that that has my portamento legato transition and that legato is enabled, right? So that's how I'm going about making sure that Sign Player is prepared. Not only is Dorico going to interpret these correctly and send the right trigger, but then that trigger is going to be interpreted correctly by Sign Player. So let's see how that sounds when we play this back. So you can especially hear that portamento, but you can also tell if you were to listen to this, if you have Berlin strings and you try different articulation or legato transitions here, you will find that the ostinato legato transition does sound, to my ear, just a little more natural than, say, slurred. Sometimes runs works better if it's very fast. But it would not sound as good if you were to use the regular fingered or slurred legato. So it's nice to have those kinds of options, and oftentimes being able to use multiple playback techniques here in order to control which legato transition you're using on a passage can be really, really nice. Now, just a final note, if for some reason you were printing this out for a player and you knew that these labels were not going to make any sense to them, you can always just go ahead and select them and then hide them down in the properties panel down here. So these are all things that you can do in order to get your score readable, but also get your mock-up playing back well. If you have any questions about any of this, I am happy to answer questions. If sort of offshoot topics come up, post them in the comments, and I'm happy to address them. Now, legato, my understanding is that legato will transfer basically these. So Shubis has asked if the legato will transfer to the Cubase score editor. In the past, I've seen that the default articulations over here do translate, but let's go ahead and see. So what I'll do is I'll save this. I'll go ahead and open up Cubase 14 here. And let's go ahead, create an empty project. That's fine. And I'll go ahead and import Dorico project. Actually, you know what I want to do is, this is a better model. This is how I actually have become accustomed to doing this, which is export MIDI. Not just opening a Dorico project, because the MIDI is actually going to save some of these kinds of details a little better. So I'll save that. Come back into Cubase, import MIDI in MIDI file. No, I don't want to create a new project. I will go here. Where am I? Live streams 25. I guess I've done quite a lot of live streams in 2025. And I've got my flow right here. Going to import there. That's my violin right there. And then if I look at that down here, but I look at the key score editor, let's see. So it does say that it's got it graphically. Now, whether or not that is going to play back, I guess I would have to actually put that into an expression map. I'm thinking that maybe it doesn't because, and thanks for giving me just a moment here to work on this spontaneously, but let's say that I were to add some staccato markings, which I know do translate, and I were to work on those, export the MIDI again, go ahead and overwrite it, new project, create empty, now import MIDI file, again, come down to my score editor. Yeah, you see the staccato marking here has actually been activated up here in the tool, which tells me that it would trigger correctly. However, these notes here are not being triggered necessarily by the slur. The thing is, I actually can see that even after I slur these notes here, it's not as though this button stays highlighted. It's just a one-time sort of toggle that creates the slur. So I think actually that that might work. And I have not tested that. And I'm sorry, I can see that actually now you've been looking at my larger screen, but I have a suspicion that actually if you were to set up a legato transition, let's actually just take a look at this because I think we're all interested to get to the bottom of this. This is the kind of thing that I really always want to get to the bottom of. So this is turning into a bonus Cubase score editor live stream. So I'm creating a new expression map. I'll go and create this, just call it violin test. And in slot 1, I'm going to call this legato. And I'm going to find legato in there, like so. And so I've got it right there. And then I'll just create another dummy, put it up there. Right, so now I'm actually going to put, I think I might actually want that to be attribute. And let's say Arco, I'll put that and make that attribute. And the nice thing about those being attribute is that they actually show up here in the tool. So when you are looking at articulations down here, oh, it's because it's not applied. So I have to come over here, put my violin test in. And this will be helpful because now we can actually see if it switches from slot 2 to legato. So let's see what that does. Let me go ahead and just move the mask there. So yeah, it didn't look like it actually triggered that. Let me make sure that it doesn't matter if that's a direction. It might matter. Let's see. Let's see if there's another slur, legato. No, that's it. That's the one. So it doesn't look like that. If I were to create another one that was staccato, like that, and that should catch. It didn't catch either. So there is maybe a little inconsistency there. I have a feeling that the articulation needs to be actually set, or that it was a matter of perhaps I got myself confused and I should have imported from Dorico. You might get a different result if you import the MIDI from Dorico, if you imported a MIDI Dorico project to get this. We are getting certainly the appearance of legato, but we're also getting appearance of the staccato playbacks, but not seeing it right away in the expression map trigger. And I would have expected to see that. So I think I would have to look at that. You know, I don't want to sit here dabbling for an extraordinarily long time. But that's a very good question about whether or not this will port over to Cubase. Currently, the answer to that is I'm not 100% sure. However, I am 100% sure that back in the world of Dorico, if we set up the proper playback techniques that we're going to need to compound together, the ones we need to glue together, if they exist as playback techniques, then we can multi-select them from inside our expression map, make sure those are set up as bass switches, and then we can trigger those reliably using the sort of normal key switches, channel switching, CC switching, that sort of thing. So I'm sure I'm going to probably wrap it up right now. Thank you so much for joining me on this call. I am going to be back here on Thursday. If you have suggestions for topics, please reach out to me. I've been very busy lately. I've been busy for months, and it has been a challenge to come up with topics. So if there's something on someone's mind, I'm always interested in kind of getting a quick start there in terms of something to cover. Otherwise, I'm confident that I will come up with something between now and Thursday. Thank you so much for supporting my channel. If you are watching this after the fact, please like and subscribe, and let me know your thoughts